Welcome to the 205 lab syllabus overview and just a brief introduction to the lab class. I did want to talk about how we meet in person once a week for kind of a lab lecture. And if you're in the Monday-Wednesday class, that's going to be on Wednesday. And if you're in the Tuesday-Thursday class, that's going to be on a Thursday and kind of a corresponding time to the recitation. So we meet every week for approximately 1 hour. I think technically it's 1 hour and 10 minutes to kind of go over the labs, to learn relevant material for, week by week, what we're doing in the laboratories. And then after the lab lecture, which is around an hour a week, there are then these TBA hours that are in your schedule, you might have noticed, because we have kind of what we call a drop-in lab. Now, on our first lab meeting, I'll be walking you into the lab and showing you where that is and where our experiment is going to be for the week. And normally what happens then is you go into that lab. Monday through Friday, it's open from 8 to 4:30 p.m. And those hours might be increasing this semester. That's yet to be determined. And you'll be taking data on your own. Well, not completely on your own. And so pretty much we've gone over all of this right now. Not completely all on your own. Every single instructor that's teaching a lab has lab hours. There we go. Every physics professor has lab hours in the drop-in lab. And we have 2 instructional assistants. New this semester, we have Tyler Hickox and Kylie, who you'll hopefully meet on the day. And they are there to help you, and they're there pretty much all the time and are there to help you if you run into any issues or have any questions about the lab. So in our drop-in lab, you go take data on your own, but you have help. You have Tyler and Kylie, and you have all of the professors who have lab hours, and it's a pretty hearty group. And we're there to answer your questions at all times. After you take your data, normally what happens then is you go and you do a lab report. And that's going to be the bulk of your grade, are the lab reports that you turn in. There's some other things, and we'll go over those in a little bit, but primarily lab reports. A couple of things about the drop-in lab. We do it this way because with the drop-in lab for a couple of reasons, but one of the things that we find the most beneficial is that you're really going to be developing independent thinking and laboratory skills. Kind of left to your own devices, students will often answer their own questions, figure things out on their own. Those are all really good skills, and that's what we're aiming towards for you guys. So it does instill independence, but you have help, plenty of help as you need it. There are typically per class 1 to 2 lab setups. I happen to teach a Monday, Wednesday, and a Tuesday, Thursday Physics 205, so it's likely that I'll have 3 to 4 setups. And really only 2 to 3 people can work on a setup at a time, and that's what's going to constitute a lab group. On the very first week, we're not going to have lab groups yet. Everyone's just going to take their own data, and our experiment will be amenable to that. But after we assign lab groups, for the second lab that we perform, then you know your whole lab group will go take data, and maybe another lab group will be waiting for that space. That's the data taking portion, and I would like to say, although you are taking data with other students, the writing of your lab reports is an individual assignment. So every single graph, calculation, theory section, derivation, typing up of equations must be done on your own, even though you took the data together. Otherwise, this is considered plagiarism. So please be careful. Do not work side by side with somebody else and type up your lab, because then your labs are going to look the same. And so that is definitely not allowed. You need to work independently. The first offense of kind of this quote-unquote plagiarism is a 25% deduction off your lab. Not the end of the world, but the second is a 0% on your second lab caught cheating, and that's going to be a big hit for your lab grade. So just bringing up this idea of individual effort being a necessity for these lab reports, and making sure that everyone is learning, you know, the appropriate skills for the lab. My late policy for the lab is that lateness is counted in 24-hour increments. So if your lab is due on a Thursday, but you turn it on a Friday, it's considered late, whether you turn it in 1 hour late or 23 hours and 59 minutes late. You do, however, receive one free late day per semester, and I keep track of that. Otherwise, each late day is considered 10%. So because the lab is shut, I don't count weekends and holidays. So for example, if your lab was due on a Thursday and you were ready late turning it in, and it's a Friday, and you're like, I'm going to be late again, and you'd be like, well, what about Saturday and Sunday? I don't have access to the lab. Well, these days don't count as late. And so when you'd go ahead and turn your lab in on Monday, you would have been 2 days late, worth 20%, unless you haven't used your free day, and if you have, then it's only 10% late. Your grade. You're going to have around 8 to 9 labs that you're going to type up and turn in for a grade throughout the semester. You're going to have at least one lab quiz that's going to constitute the part of your grade. These lab reports and quizzes constitute the entirety of your grade, and they'll be equally weighted. How do I type up my lab? Well, each lab, when we meet in person for our lab lecture for the lab is separate than the class, if you haven't kind of figured that out. 205 lab versus 205, which is just the main lecture. But for each in-person lab lecture that we have, and we're starting a new lab, I'm going to be giving you a printout of the lab for you to look at. And I'm going to give you access to the file that you're receiving as a printout. Let me show you. Here I am. I'm actually accessing an old Canvas page because you guys, I haven't built your Canvas page yet. It's not published. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to my Spring 2026 205L page. And you can see here a couple of things. One is that there's an area that says Tools for Lab. Here I am making it bigger and smaller so you can see all the things in it. And then just labs. If I go into just labs, for example, here's my Atwood lab. I'm clicking on that. You can see that in there is an Atwood machine document. Let's go ahead and open it and take a look. And this is a .doc file. It doesn't like it in Canvas, but you can see it's just a file that you have access to with tables and spaces where you're filling in different things, explain, complete data table with directions, and the error analysis at the end. And normally what's happening is that you would have gotten a printout of the Atwood Machine Lab in class, and then would have taken your data probably in that printout, and then you would go into this and type up your lab report. So after typing up into this .doc file, here it's a .doc file, I'll be changing that to a .docx file. After you've typed it up, that's what you'll print out and hand to me. Every single time you hand a lab in to me, I need a cover sheet. It's just basic information. Oops, let's go back to a lab class. So every single lab that we're doing has a page in here that has the file available to you. This other section, which is Tools for Lab, has a lot of important information. So on the first week that we meet, we're going to learn about vernier calipers and micrometers. And here is that information for you also online as a resource. So the Tools for Lab area, let's get rid of the labs. The Tools for Lab area is more of a resource place for you. Here is graphing software. This is the graphing software we're going to use. There's a lot of information here. Very importantly is our site license information. You're going to need that to access the software. And here is information on how to access the software and how to use the software. Here's information on what is required on a graph. Here's information about sig figs, uncertainty, propagation of error, all things that we're going to be doing in our first week. More information. You'll see there's just a lot of information on how to handle data sets and information and graphing. Information about random versus systematic types of error and how to identify them. Basically, resources. Tools for lab, resources for you. Labs, where you find the documents that you type into. So all of that will be on your Canvas page. So when I say you'll have access to a .doc file, that means that I don't want you to rewrite the lab report. I want you to use that file and type into it. And that's how you'll type up your lab report. Here I mention again that you'll need a cover sheet. And here I mentioned that you're going to have to type up equations. This takes a little bit of work. There are equation editors, standard, in Microsoft Word. You have access to Microsoft Word with your enrollment at Sierra College. And so that might be the easiest way for you to type up math equations. I like to use the LaTeX language since it's standard in many things, but that's maybe something you'll develop over time. Okay. Here's some rules of conduct. I think it's pretty basic stuff. We have like a drop-in lab. There can be like no people in there or a lot of people in there. It depends. Early in the morning, there's less people. 10 to 2 probably is prime time hours. So please keep your noise, reasonable. There's no open food or drink allowed in labs. Be careful where you put your personal belongings. Don't put them in the way. There's a lot of information for you to look at here. What to do if there's a problem. What about computers, etc. This is stuff I'm required to put in here, called our student learning outcomes. I feel like that's everything. So let me just summarize again really quickly. Every week we're going to meet for a 1-hour lecture, or 1 hour and 10-minute lecture. That's every week. On your own time, you're going to go to the drop-in lab. It's open between 8 and 4:30, Monday through Friday. That's when you take your data. At home or wherever in the library, you're going to type up your lab reports. That involves a lot of different things, including typing up equations, graphs, error analysis. There's a lot. They normally take a lot of time. I recommend getting help from our tutors or past peers for the first few. You're not reinventing the wheel, because in the lab lecture, I give you a handout with the lab that we're working on. And you have access to that .docx file or .doc file in the Canvas page. That's where I showed you. And you're going to type directly into this, so you're not reinventing the wheel. And you'll turn that into me with a cover sheet. Also available on those Canvas pages. And those are your lab reports. Okay. We talked about plagiarism, we talked about lateness policies. Hopefully that explains everything. If not, we're going to follow up with some questions in the lab. Okay, I hope this was beneficial. Enjoy.